That's a big one.
Oh, it happened. Oh, it happened.
I got you. I got you. Yeah, baby, look at that. How about a buzz bait? Catch a big old tub like that. Get you some, scopers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the garage and the next technique of the month video for the month of March. This one that's a fun way to fish, man. This is something that I enjoy doing, and I feel like I have seen happen some in February, but certainly in March you see it. And it could even happen in April, just kind of depending a little bit on where you're at, you know, in the country. But this is certainly something that, you know, I have seen over the years around this time of the year, and in a lot of different parts of the country, honestly. Our first BPT last year down at Toledo Bend was early February, and saw some of this going on there, and it was how I had a decent finish there, made the knockout round, had a solid tournament on that. But really that rising water, you know, freshly flooded cover is something that those fish will absolutely get in this time of the year. Not all the fish in the lake, as we saw at that BPT last year at Toledo Bend. Again, I had a solid finish there, but on the knockout day, I got my teeth kicked in by guys out in the middle of the lake shaking a little minnow around. But I feel like I had the most fun, no doubt about that, in that event. And a lot of that fun came on a buzz bait. It was February 1st, and about my fifth cast with a buzzbait, I caught a 512. I think that was the biggest fish I caught on a buzzbait all year, actually. It was about my fifth cast with one last year in that BPT down at Toledo Bend. But when you've got, when you've got water that is rising, oftentimes it's going to get a lot of stuff in the water. You know, it's going to pick up debris. It's going to pick up, you know, floating. You know, maybe it could depend on how much of a rise you have. It could be a lot of debris, could be, you know, hazardous boating conditions and stuff. But even back in those places where you're actually fishing, you're going to have, you know, a lot of stuff floating on the surface and a lot of particles in the water. That being the case, oftentimes, like, those fish and some of that would have bit a crankbait, but you just physically can't fish one. I mean, you're going to fight it the whole time. So a big part of being productive this time of the year, when you have those kind of conditions where that water is rising and you've got a lot of that floating stuff, it's just being effective, just being productive. Those are the things that you want to think about. And that's where stuff like a buzz bait, like a swim jig, maybe a bladed jig, a spinner bait, those type of things, they become much more effective because they're just efficient. That's really, truly in what it boils down to. Even a frog, you know, a hollow-bodied frog is something that will work in those kind of conditions because it is extremely weedless. You can actually fish it really slow if you want to, you know, or need to in those situations. When I'm thinking about this a lot, for me, you know, if I've got that, if that water is rising some, you know, and I don't mind it, honestly, to be rising 3 or 4 inches a day, you know, 6 inches a day is kind of, if it's rising a foot a day, that can be a little bit tough, honestly. But that 2, 3, 4, 6 inches a day, that's not too bad. But, you know, you start jumping, you know, much faster than that, and the fishing can get pretty tough. But a slow, steady rise like that is definitely what you're looking for. But water temperature is a big part of that too. If that water's in the 50s, 53, 55, and it's doing that and it's rising, and you've got some good conditions, you're getting some sun, and that water is continuing to warm, man, that is when this is a really, really fun way to fish. If that water's colder than that, you know, it's down around 50 or something, this is probably not the thing to be doing or trying to make happen at that point in time. But yeah, if you've got mid 50s and good conditions, that's the time to try to make something like this really, really work. For me, a big thing that I'm going to look at anytime I've got rising water, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, pre-spawn like what we're talking about here, if it's post-spawn, if it's in the fall for some reason, anytime you have rising water, something that you want to keep in mind is being able to reach the bank, okay? And there's places where I fished, I think of, let's say Kentucky Lake, for example, and the back of a lot of bays and pockets at Kentucky Lake, you've got buck bushes that are just endless amounts of them. Same way at Toledo Bend, Raven, some of those places. You get in some areas, and once the water gets up to a certain level, the amount of cover is just endless, and you truly can't get to where the water is really, really shallow. That's kind of a no-go for me. I get to those places where I literally feel like I can't get to the fish. So a big part of it is always being able to get to the bank, to get to a hard bank. In that particular situation, I keep referring to this back to Toledo Bend last year. That was like a residential area that had some dugout canals and stuff, and had very good, hard to find banks. And that was pretty unique to that area. And that was why I was able to be productive in there, because I could still get to the bank even though the water had came up 3 or 4 feet, a couple weeks before we got there. So keep that in mind, being able to truly reach the bank. And it's not the fact that you just need to reach the bank, it's that you got to be able to get to where the fish are and where it's actually shallow enough to where those fish are at. That's a very, very big part of it. Another thing with that, it's typically going to be off-colored water, so you don't have to, overthink your bait colors and that kind of thing. A dark-colored swim jig, a black and blue, a Okeechobee crawl, something like that. And for me, on a buzz bait, it's going to be a white one. 9 times out of 10. I throw a white buzz bait in dirty water. I throw a black buzz bait in clear water. And again, this is probably going to be a dirty water situation, so I'm going to be going with a white buzz bait. And I always say a buzz bait, but it's a buzz toad. I never use a skirt anymore. I've got a toad on my buzz bait. That's what I'm going to be throwing with that. That would be the two main ones that come to mind. We'll go ahead and go through the setup for both of those. For my buzz bait, it's a 7-foot medium heavy action carbon light rod, a carbon light reel, 8-3-to-1 reel. I do like a fast reel for my buzzbait fishing. That just allows me to be able to not work as hard as the angler. I can slow down and keep that bait up, and then when a fish bites it, I've got that really fast reel to be able to take up slack. Usually 20-pound XPS fluorocarbon, 17 if that's what I've got on there, but 17 or 20, either one of those is fine for your buzzbait fishing. For the swim jig, I'll throw it on a couple different setups. This one works really well, but I also like the Signature Series rod. It's a 7.2 medium heavy. That's probably my favorite for it, but the 7.1 medium heavy and the Platinum, also an excellent setup, but a medium heavy action. I don't like a super stiff rod for a swim jig when I'm throwing it on braid like that. So this is 50-pound Bass Pro braid, the XPS stuff. It's really good stuff. And then again, a carbon light reel, 8-3-to-1 gear ratio. Platinum reel is good for that as well, but you do want that 8-3-to-1 gear ratio. Kind of the same deal with that swim jig, keeping it up high. And that's the now VMC heavy duty swim jig and the Bass Pro Crawdagy crawl on the back of that. That Crawdagy is man, as we've done the underwater pool test and stuff with that thing really moves exceptionally well, moves a lot of water. Swims really good on the back of that swim jig. But yeah, this time of the year, man, think about those areas where if that water's rising on your fishery, you've got that low to mid 50 minimum, water temperature range. Get in those places where you can reach the bank, where you can fish really, really shallow, and any type of cover you've got in there, any freshly flooded stuff that you've got going on, those fish will oftentimes get right up in it. And a big key with this, something to keep in mind, you go through an area and you catch 2 or 3, man, remember that exact little zone and come back through it again an hour later, 2 hours later. Oftentimes you're going to go through, you're going to catch a few fish out of a place, and whether you caught what was there or they just kind of, you kind of busted them up a little bit, give it an hour or 2, let those fish reset, and oftentimes you're going to come right back through, and in that same exact 20-foot section, you're going to get bit again. It's really interesting how that happens, and I see that, I feel like, more this time of the year than I do other times. There'll be little key spots within a big, vast area that all looks the same that are just the places where the fish really like. So definitely keep that little tip in mind, something I thought of right there at the end. So get out there on the water, enjoy the springtime. Hope y'all catch some big ones.